Right now, millions of Americans are making a financial move that could permanently damage their retirement security, and many of them do not even fully realize the true cost of what they are doing. A record number of workers are pulling money out of their 401k plans early, not to invest it somewhere else, but simply to pay rent, cover a medical bill, or keep the lights on. And here is why this matters to you directly. The rules around these withdrawals have been changing, and some of those changes actually make it easier to access your retirement money than ever before. That sounds helpful on the surface, but easier access also means more people are using their retirement savings as an emergency fund, and the long-term damage from that can be serious. So let's start here. In 2025, a record 6% of workers enrolled in 401k plans administered by Vanguard took what's called a hardship withdrawal. Now, 6% might not sound like a lot, but when you compare it to the pre-pandemic average of about 2% back in 2018, you start to see just how much things have shifted. And this is not a one-time spike either. This was the sixth consecutive year that hardship withdrawals went up, 6 years in a row. That trend started back in 2018 and has just kept climbing. And that tells you something important about where a lot of American households actually are right now. Now, here's where things get kind of jarring, because at the same time, these withdrawals are hitting record highs for 01k balances are also at record highs. The average account balance across all Vanguard plans rose 13% in 2025 to a record $167,970. Fidelity, which analyzed nearly 25 million accounts, reported that the average balance climbed 11% to 146,400. The stock market had a strong year. The S&P 500 was up 16%. The Nasdaq jumped 20%. On paper, American retirement savers have never looked wealthier. So, how do you square that? How do you have record account balances and record early withdrawals happening at the exact same time? There's the question that really gets to the heart of what is going on in the American economy today. Now, President Trump was not wrong when he told Congress earlier this year that your 401ks are way up. The numbers do support that. And look, a record 45% of Vanguard participants increased their savings rate in 2025. Nearly one-third of plans with automatic enrollment started workers out at a savings rate of 6% of pay or higher, which is nearly 3 times the share doing that back in 2013. So yes, there is real progress happening in how Americans are saving for retirement, and this is but that progress is not evenly distributed. While some workers are building serious retirement wealth, a growing subset of those same workers is so financially stretched that they are willing to pay taxes, penalties, and sacrifice their future security just to get access to cash today. And what are they using that cash for? The top reasons workers gave for taking hardship withdrawals were to avoid foreclosure or eviction and to pay medical expenses. The median withdrawal was just $1,900. That is not someone raiding their retirement account to buy a boat. That is someone trying to stay in their home or afford a doctor's visit. And that is where the real story lives. Now, let's talk about what a hardship withdrawal actually costs you, because this is where it gets sobering. If you take money out of your 401k before age 59 and a half, the IRS treats that money as ordinary income, so you owe income taxes on it. On top of that, unless your withdrawal meets one of 12 specific qualifying criteria, you also get hit with an additional 10% penalty. So if you pull out $5,000, you might owe not only income taxes on that amount, but an extra $500 penalty on top of it. And that penalty is paid at tax time, which means it can sneak up on you if you're not prepared. But even beyond the tax hit, the real cost is what you give up in the future. Finance firm SoFi calculated that if a 35-year-old employee took a $1,000 hardship withdrawal today, that same $1,000, had it stayed invested, would have been worth anywhere between $4,765 and over $11,700 by retirement based on average 401k returns. So a $1,000 withdrawal today could cost you more than $10,000 down the road. Now multiply that across millions of workers taking withdrawals with a median value of nearly $2,000, and you start to see the scale of what this trend could mean for American retirement security over the long run. And yet people are still doing it, which tells you that for a lot of households, the immediate need is just too urgent to think about 30 years from now. Speaking of which, this is all happening against a backdrop of some pretty alarming broader financial data. Roughly 40% of consumers do not have enough in savings to cover a $1,000 emergency expense. About 40% of consumers are likely still carrying debt from holiday season. For millions of households, the 401k has quietly become the only meaningful financial reserve they have. Not a retirement vehicle, but an emergency fund of last resort. Now, you might be wondering, can anyone just take a hardship withdrawal whenever they want? And the answer is no. There are rules. The IRS requires that you demonstrate an immediate and heavy financial need, and you can only withdraw the amount necessary to address it. There are 6 categories the IRS automatically recognizes as qualifying medical expenses: buying a primary residence, costs to avoid eviction, home repair for damage to your primary residence, funeral expenses, and certain educational costs. Outside of those categories, your employer has discretion to decide whether your situation qualifies. And workers generally need to show they have tried to get the money from other sources first. So then why are withdrawals climbing so fast if the rules are this strict? Well, part of the answer is that Congress has made it easier over time. Back in 2018, lawmakers eliminated the requirement that workers take out a 401k loan before requesting a hardship distribution. That used to be a meaningful speed bump that slowed things down. Removing it opened the door considerably. Then, in 2022, the Secure 2.0 Act expanded things further. It gave employers flexibility to allow hardship withdrawals for victims of domestic abuse and for workers affected by federally declared disasters. And maybe most notably, it allowed workers to take out up to $1,000 penalty-free for a broadly defined emergency purpose once every 3 years, with the option to access the provision again the following year if they repay it first. Vanguard has been candid about this, noting that given it is now easier to request a hardship withdrawal, a modest increase in the numbers is not entirely surprising. There's also something interesting happening with automatic enrollment that is worth understanding. Over the past decade, more and more employers have started automatically enrolling new hires into their 401k plans, which has been a huge win for retirement participation, especially among lower-income workers who might never have opened an account otherwise. Among Vanguard's roughly 1,300 employer plans, 61% automatically enrolled new hires in 2025, up from just 34% in 2013. That is genuinely great news for long-term retirement savings. But here is the ironic part. By bringing more workers, including lower-income workers with little financial cushion elsewhere, into the system, automatic enrollment has also created more people who have retirement savings to draw on when an emergency hits. As Vanguard put it, plan features like automatic enrollment can leave workers with a cushion they might not otherwise have had, making hardship withdrawals possible in the first place. So, some portion of this rise in withdrawals is not just about financial distress. It is also the simple reality that more people now have accounts from which to withdraw. And also, let's talk about Generation X for a second, because the data on this group deserves real attention. Gen X, those born between 1965 and 1980, are the next generation in line to retire. And on the surface, some of their numbers look okay. They save an average of 15.4% of their gross income in 2025. Nearly a tenth of them made catch-up contributions, which are extra contributions allowed for workers 50 and older. But the median 401k balance for Gen Zers is just $67,100. For people who are in their mid-40s to early 60s and looking at retirement in the next decade or two, that is a serious shortfall. And here's the thing, most Gen Zers will not have a traditional pension. They entered the workforce right as employers were shifting away from defined benefit pensions towards self-directed 401ks, which put the full responsibility for retirement savings onto individual workers. A lot of those workers were not set up to handle that, and the numbers today reflect that reality. On the flip side, there are now 665,000 accounts with balances of $1 million or more, up from 537,000 in 2024. 60% of those millionaire accounts belong to Gen X. And on average, those participants have been saving for 25 years. So the success stories are real, but they represent a small fraction of the generation. The median balance of $67,100 is a far more representative picture of where most Gen X actually stand right now. So what does all of this leave us? Well, what we are really looking at is two economies running side by side. One where retirement accounts are growing, savings behaviors are improving, and some workers are building genuine long-term wealth. And another where a growing number of households are so financially fragile that they're quietly draining the one asset they have just to get through the month. Now, the big takeaway here is not that 401ks are bad or that people who take hardship withdrawals made a wrong decision. Sometimes you're facing eviction. Sometimes you have a medical bill you cannot pay. And in those moments, you do what you have to do. But understanding the real cost of an early withdrawal, the taxes, the penalty, and especially the long-term compounding you give up, that knowledge matters, because sometimes there are other options worth exploring first, like a personal loan, a payment plan with a medical provider, or a conversation with a nonprofit credit counselor before going to that account. If you have been saving consistently for years and you feel like you are behind, you are not alone and you are not out of options. The data on workers who save persistently for 15 years or more is genuinely encouraging. Time and consistency are still the two most powerful tools you have. Thanks so much for being here. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.